Hello, and welcome to The Fool and the Philosopher.
The Philosopher and The Fool. Say the last time we had the conversation.
The episode we lost was really unusual because we actually had a conversation.
Yeah.
Instead of it being like a lecture or a point-by-point thing. No, I think that is true to an extent. But you came up with an absolutely brilliant idea. So even if we don't talk about what we lost, I want to at least have somewhere on record so nobody ever forgets it, that you came up with a brilliant idea on the episode we lost. Which was that... so I'll start with someone else's idea, Rasputin's. So in Breath of the Wild, a lot of people don't like the weapon break system.
Yeah.
But it is actually very good because it forces you to adapt to new styles and use new weapons and always be improvising. So in Dark Souls, there isn't much incentive to try out new weapons.
Yeah.
Because you find the one you're comfortable with and you stick with it. They do have a durability system, but it does nothing for the game. However, the problem is that if they had a durability system where things really broke, you wouldn't get that feeling of finally finding a new weapon that is so great, because each weapon you find feels amazing and unique.
Yeah.
And same with the armor. So you came up with a solution that rectifies the durability system within Dark Souls, which is also pointless because the weapons take so long to break, it might as well not be there to a degree. It's only the only benefit in Dark Souls is that if you're willing to switch weapons, you'll be much richer because you're not paying money to repair your weapons.
Yeah.
And then in The Witcher, the durability system is there for no reason whatsoever.
Besides maybe to drain a bit of money from you and be annoying.
Yeah, but they could just make other things more expensive.
I feel like the durability in The Witcher is, at some point in the games before it, in the books, like, Geralt's stuff gets worn down, and it was written at one point he needs to repair it. So we have to add repairing to the game, and we have to have durability on arms. It's just we have to do it.
Yeah,
I feel like it was a checklist for them.
No, it
wasn't thought about.
I think what they did probably was, we have a crafting system because he's a Witcher, obviously, and therefore we need repairable items.
Yeah.
And weapon durability. Like, it was not thought out at all.
No.
Like most of The Witcher, they're just following the trends.
Yeah, it was a checklist. Like a lot of video games have checklists.
But, of course, in The Witcher's defense, the economy is the best part of the game by far.
Yeah.
In most video games, you end up far too rich. In The Witcher, it's balanced amazingly well. You feel like, what did I say last time? You feel like a constantly broke person who has to go and hunt monsters to fund his gaming addiction.
Yeah.
Because you always just need that new card and you can't do it, so you have to go kill a werewolf.
I mean, I have the paper doll addiction of I want to wear all the pretty armor, and so I have to fund that.
None of the armor in The Witcher appeals to me. It all looks like just basic medieval gambersons.
I like basic medieval gambersons. Some of them look different than others.
Dark Souls. So you know how I said I wanted Love Nikki, but as an RPG?
Yeah.
Dark Souls is kind of that. Like, the costumes are all pretty unique. There's a lot of them. So I think one of the things... Like, I talked about how Dark Souls, its animation depth is crazy. Like, each weapon has several different levels of competence, and each weapon plays totally differently.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of how they achieve that, and part of how they achieve the massive costume variety as well, and the massive moveset your character can do. Like, you can kick, jump, spin, all this stuff. All the enemies can do everything you can do. They can even drink health potions. So I think they didn't have to develop as much. Like, every time they add an enemy, they've just given you more items and more gear and more animations. And so I think that's probably part of the secret of how they did it.
That's fair.
Like, the bosses, obviously, are the exception to the rule. But, but most of the undead are just undead like you. So they do all the same stuff as you. I was actually really surprised the first time I saw one drink a health potion. Like, I hit it, and then it hit me a bunch, so I backed off and started drinking. And so it just started chugging one. I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You can't do that. That's what I'm doing. So Breath of the Wild, a guy came up with a solution to not get rid of the breaking system at all, because it's actually very important to forcing you to constantly be dynamic. But instead to tell the player, no. This is supposed to be here. You want your weapons to be breaking.
Yeah.
That's part of the game. And so what he came up with was the idea of shards, so that, and potentially different levels of shards. So if you break a royal shard, a royal weapon, for example, you get a royal shard. If you break a wooden weapon, you just get a common shard, something like that. And these shards you can use to create the best items in the game, or maybe the best potions or something like that. So if you want like a really cool suit of armor, or maybe a fairy upgrade, maybe all the fairy upgrades require these shards. So you really want to upgrade your Hylian hood.
Yeah.
You need 7 royal shards.
So you need to be chucking royal broadswords at hoglins.
Yeah, so you need to be throwing your royal broadswords and smashing them constantly.
Yeah.
And what that does is that actually makes you enjoy it every time your weapon breaks. Like, there's another weapon. And it might cause the players to smash their weapons against trees and rocks and whatnot. But that's fine because...
Then they don't have that weapon and they're fighting things with their wooden sword.
Yeah, then it forces them to be creative and innovative, which is the whole point of the game.
Yeah.
Master Mode ruins this, of course, with its regeneration, which I ran into today, and it actually... I didn't realize how bad it was because it's so fast that the only way to fight is to use your weapons and go into combat. So I was trying to take out this camp, and I couldn't think of how to get a weapon over it. Like, my bow was out of arrows and it was sucked. And I couldn't beat them in hand-to-hand combat, and there was no metal around to fling at them.
Yeah.
And I couldn't stasis anything nearby. So I was like, how on earth do I attack this camp without going near them? So this idea just came into my head. I'm sure many people have done this, but I came up with it on my own. I put down a bomb.
Yeah.
I put an Octorok balloon on it, so it started floating up in the air. Then I took out a Korok leaf, and I blew the bomb so it floated over the enemy camp. And then I shot the balloon with an arrow and dropped a bomb in the center of their camp and then blew it up. And that was so cool. And then they all regenerated, and they were fine because in Master Mode they regenerate. So you can't use environmental damage against them in Master Mode.
Yeah.
Which was the most idiotic decision anyone ever came up with there.
Yeah.
I think the idea is they didn't want you to be able to abuse it by hiding in a corner and just... But what you could do is, if an enemy can see you, they can't heal. Or, like, if an enemy is actively moving towards you, it doesn't heal. Or maybe if you're looking at an enemy, they don't heal.
Yeah.
Or maybe just don't have the regeneration, except some people are going to ruin the game for themselves.
Yeah.
Instead of removing an entire fundamental aspect of the game. So anyways, Breath of the Wild, the shards, brilliant idea. You came up with one for Dark Souls, which I think a lot of games could use. I don't think Breath of the Wild could actually use it because it's all about improvising on the fly. Yeah. But for games where the point is to try out, like, it'd be really nice in Dark Souls if there was more incentive to use the massive amount of weapons, like the dual wielding anything you want, using a spear, using an axe, using a greatsword, using a Zweihander, using a halberd, using the bows, the crossbows, the magic. There's so much in that game. You came up with the idea of weapons have much lower durability, for one thing.
Yeah.
And when a weapon breaks, it doesn't get destroyed. It just goes into your inventory and you can't use it.
Yeah.
And in order to replenish its durability, there's no crafting you can do. You can't go to a place. You have to use a different weapon. So your sword breaks, you pull out your axe, and every time you hit an enemy, it repairs it by like half of durability or something.
Yeah.
It gets better and better. And so what this means is it has the benefit of not only do you use more weapons, every weapon you find is still great. In fact, finding duplicates of a weapon is even better because you lose your favorite axe and you have a backup axe you can use to repair your other axe.
Yeah.
And so that's why you'd also need it to be balanced right or diminishing right so that eventually all your axes would run out, or your axe, you'd use up the one axe and the other one would only be half full, and then that one runs out. And so what you could do potentially is make them only fill up half as fast as they break, and then you have to target a specific weapon in your inventory to repair potentially.
Yeah.
Or it could be your entire inventory repairs very slowly. There's a bunch of options.
Well, I mean, you could do...
But the sheer brilliant idea is that of your weapon goes on cooldown essentially, and you can only take it off of cooldown by embracing other aspects of the game.
Yeah.
I think the whole game would have to be made slightly easier for that to work, just because it'd be frustrating otherwise because then all you'd do is you'd go to the weakest enemy you could find and hit him like 50 times until you got your weapon back, and then...
You also must have a diversity of enemy hit.
You could try something like that. Like in Breath of the Wild, they actually do something like that where you get experience every time you kill an enemy.
Yeah.
You just don't realize it. But there's a cap for each enemy type. So if you've killed enough red Boku Goblins, you'll no longer get experience from red Boku Goblins.
Yeah.
So you could do something similar where every time you switch weapons, it resets to some degree. It'd be tricky not to have some cheese in there. But look, if a player is going to go through all that effort, then just give it to them, I say.
Yeah, I mean, there is a certain game style and gameplay to actually cheesing, and there's a different kind of enjoyment from cheesing. And I feel like knowing your audience and what they want, you should be aware of cheese. And as long as it's not a competitive game, then keep the cheese in.
Or it depends. Like if you have there's Team Fortress, right, with rocket jumping.
Yeah. Well, that's not cheesy. That's a cool mechanic.
That wasn't intentional, I don't think.
Yeah, that's not intentional. It's cool. So that's an unintentional mechanic. But cheese, so Dota, for example. So You know in chess how there's the idea of there's killing every single piece and winning through virtue of that, or there's
capturing the king.
Capturing the king. So in Dota, there's this...
Well, checking the king.
There's this concept of you actually want to take the throne. So there's fighting between heroes, and there's fighting against your enemy's buildings, and you want to destroy the enemy's throne. And there's a certain thing which a lot of people really don't like in Dota, and it's called cheesy, and these strategies are removed. Is there's sort of acceptance that you fight until one team gets stronger than the other, and then the stronger team takes out the enemy team's buildings by the virtue of them being stronger. They can no longer defend the buildings. And then they fight on the throne, and you try to defend your throne, and if you're still not even strong enough to defend yourself at the heart of your power, you lose. So that's the accepted narrative of Dota. There's a cheese in Dota, which is, I am really, really good at killing buildings, and so while you're not paying attention, I'm going to put you in checkmate. I'm going to kill your throne. Even though I can't beat you in a fight, I can beat your throne if you're not there. And I'm really good at being where you aren't are. I'm really good at killing your buildings. And so that's a cheese in Dota. And so,
I think in a competitive game, there's nothing off limits because you're trying to win.
Yes.
But
from wanting to keep people playing and cheese.
Well, I think the developers should potentially address that.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. But in a single player game, it's sort of like...
Well, you don't want the players to optimize the fun out of their game.
Yes.
But I think...
You can accept that some cheese is fun.
Like, Dungeon Lords is a fun game.
Yeah. So is Divinity.
Yeah.
Divinity is a much better example, I think.
Yeah, Divinity, it's very possible to... I wouldn't even call it... It's possible to find very clever ways to win everything.
Yeah.
I don't call that cheese, really. That's... Strategy, tactics. Yeah. It's possible to come up with very clever... Now, what I would call...
I mean... A thing that I call cheese is there's a very difficult Minecraft mod, and there's these bosses who are basically impossible to beat unless you have the best gear. Or you can stick them in the hole and cut their feet repeatedly until they die.
Or another one...
And I call that kind of cheese. But that is the strategy of adapting to the situation.
A common one in a lot of RPGs is you get the enemy stuck on a piece of environment, and then you shoot them with arrows until they die. I think that's much more common sort of cheese. But why are we talking about cheese?
We're talking about hitting Dark Souls with the switching items, and you can cheese the durability.
I think if something is... So, for example, in Breath of the Wild, there is the wind bomb, where you can fly, essentially, by hitting yourself with your own bomb and going through the air. And now that isn't how the game was intended to be played, but it's difficult enough that I think, even if Nintendo was still patching the game, they shouldn't patch it out. Yeah. Just because... If a player wants to do it, then they should have the option to do it. So in the Dark Souls case, if a player is willing to go through the crazy amount of effort to come up with... So I think you should try to implement a method to prevent the players from getting back their durability.
Well, I think it's not preventing them, but...
It's protecting them.
It's not... I think it's going out the wrong direction, so...
No, I think it's protecting them because... Well, but if it's possible to just hit the smallest enemy over and over again, they will do that and they will be bored.
But... Instead of saying you can't do that, I think instead what you should say is hitting enemies with a variety of different weapons, newer enemies, you should get something out of it. So instead of...
Your durability replenishes faster.
Yeah, so instead of disincentivizing hitting the weaker enemy, you should encourage using the diversity of items.
Well, that's the same thing with the Breath of the Wild shard idea, right? Yeah. You're saying to them, look, the reason we did this might not be entirely clear, but the intended style of play is for your weapons to break constantly. Yeah. And to demonstrate this, we will reward you for breaking your weapons. So yeah, in Dark Souls, you could say,
we want you to use all the weapons.
You get a durability multiplier for every unique enemy you kill. Yeah. So if you kill 20 different enemies before you die, you get a times... Like, make each one times 10%. You get a times 200% durability.
It could even be the higher level enemy you kill, the more durability you get back on your weapons.
I think then you just go to the one that you could beat most reliably.
Yeah, I guess so.
I think diversity is the goal there. Yeah. Where kill as many enemies as you can before you die, and you will get the most durability back. Yeah. Like, the multiplier just keeps going up for every unique enemy. Instead of kill enemy, jump off a building, respawn it. Kill an enemy, jump off a building, respawn it. Because... Then nobody's having fun. Yeah. Not even the enemies. I mean, they're dying like thousands of times. So, but that's just the finicky bit. The cool bit is the idea of the more it forces you to have variety. Simply, so it actually gives a use for the durability system within a game like Dark Souls, but it could be expanded to many other games. And we were also talking about a similar idea of a lot of games could do with a self-balancing system, whereby the less you use an item, the more powerful it becomes to encourage you to use it more. And then as you use it, it slowly goes down.
Yeah.
Now, your system forces it upon the player, which I think is better in some ways. But a way to make it like, hey, you haven't used the anvil in like 4 hours. It now does double damage.
Yeah.
Like,
the Eurogame idea of putting coins onto an item.
Yeah, like, so there's a game called Small World where you get randomly generated civilizations.
Yeah.
And so you could get something like...
goblins with hats.
Yeah, goblins with hats. Or you could get seafaring rats. Or you could get scholar gnomes.
Yeah.
And some of these combinations are way better than others.
Yeah.
Some are terrible. Like if you get like seafaring dwarves, for example, would probably be pretty terrible because it gives you a lot of places to attack from, but you only get like 6 dwarves, so there's not much point to it. Yeah. Whereas something like ravaging skeletons, I think it is really good because skeletons are already quite large in number, and then you double your number every time you win a fight, sort of thing. So it's really powerful. But every single combination is actually viable because whenever you want to buy a combination, you have to put $1 on every single combination you didn't buy.
Yeah.
Which means that as the game goes on, and let's say to win the game, you need 100. So you put your victory points on these things to buy the other ones, essentially. Yeah. So let's say the game's coming to an end and you see, oh, here's that terrible seafaring dwarves. But they've got 12 victory points on them. That is the most... Like, that on its own might be enough to win me the game, even if they do nothing.
Yeah.
And so they become the most powerful civilization by virtue of not being chosen over and over again. And that's very common game design in Eurogames.
Yeah.
Where the option not taken...
You auction off things and...
Yeah. And the option not taken becomes...
more valuable.
More valuable and more valuable until it is taken.
Yeah.
It's a self-balancing mechanic that video games, I think, should wholly embrace. I've been playing Here's My Magic's Advanced Classes mod, which has an interesting take on that, where they fix... So it's a era mod or a WoG mod, but it's, I think, the best one that's ever come out because it doesn't just throw like random garbage in like all the other WoG mods. Like that's fun for variety, you know, it's fun to have variety. What it does is it actually fixes the fundamental problems of Heroes of Might and Magic. Yeah. So it says, look, Tactics is one of the best abilities in the game, but it slows the game down to a crawl. So instead, we're going to make Tactics very powerful, but you don't get to choose the order of your units. Instead, they get bonus attack, defense, and speed. Mm. So we just make all your units much better if you take Tactics, but we're not going to let you rearrange the board because that just really slows the game down and it's boring.
Yeah. And
then they do things like...
I have Tactics 5. I can put my units in the middle of the battlefield.
They make like abilities like Eagle Eye goes from being nearly worthless to every time you learn a new... Like you're at basic Eagle Eye, you're guaranteed to learn a new spell whenever someone casts it. Mm-hmm. And when you learn it, you gain 1 magic power permanently. Mm-hmm. And at the start of battle, because you have an Eagle Eye, you can shoot the opponent's army before the battle begins with a spell, and you'll take out a bunch of them. Yeah. And Eagle Eye gives you more magic. So they just massively buffed it. So they fixed a lot of fundamental problems. One of the things they do for spell balance, which it's kind of weird, it's almost the opposite of what we're talking about, is they make it so that... Because a huge aspect of the Advanced Classes mod is to make magic good.
Yeah.
And the way they did it is really interesting. They actually made it much more expensive. They made spells much rarer, and they made the mage guilds much more expensive to upgrade. And you might think, wait, so they nerfed magic to make the magic classes better. But the reason magic is bad in Here's My Magic is not because it's weak. It's actually incredibly powerful.
It just doesn't scale.
No, it scales fine. The problem, except for the damaging abilities, like Magic Hero and stuff doesn't scale. But like slow is amazing always.
Yes.
No, the reason Magic Heroes are considered to be bad is because there is no magical difference between a Might Hero at level 50 and a Magic Hero at level 50. If they can both cast Slow and they can both cast Town Portal, there's no difference between them. It doesn't matter how many spell points they have as long as they can do those 2 simple things.
Yeah.
And there is nothing stopping a Might Hero from getting all those. But now it's nearly impossible for a Might hero to even learn something like Wisdom. And even if you do have all those spells, each spell costs like 40 spell points, so only if you've been dedicated to getting a bunch of knowledge will you actually be able to cast a spell. So they actually make magic much harder to get in order to make it stronger. But the thing they do is every time you cast a spell, there's a chance it gets permanently stronger.
Yeah.
So if you cast Magic Arrow, there's a 2% chance, no, there's a 10% chance it gets 2% stronger for the rest of the game. Which I think is kind of weird, because it almost, like, look at an ability like Ice Bolt, right?
Yeah.
Versus Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt is just better. So Magic Arrow versus Ice Bolt. Ice Bolt is more expensive, but it does a little bit more damage.
Yeah.
But Magic Arrow...
2 Magic Arrows is better than Ice Bolt and cheaper.
Yeah. But if you think, oh, this battle's only going to last for 2 rounds, then you use Ice Bolt, just because it's... But Lightning Bolt is just better in every way.
Yeah.
It does way more damage than Ice Bolt, and it costs about the same.
The only argument I can make is the rare cases of damage type, and even then it barely matters.
Like if you're fighting a fire thing or something weak to, or strong against air or something.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure their system makes much sense, because I can either cast Magic Arrow, which is more efficient, or Ice Bolt. So I keep casting Magic Arrow. And as the game goes on, Ice Bolt becomes worse and worse relative to Magic Arrow.
Yeah.
I think the idea is that early game spells stay relevant.
Yeah.
And the other thing is rare case utility spells like Mirth or Sorrow or Hypnotize become way better because you can purposely train them to actually get like a double Mirth strength or something.
Resurrect.
Yeah, well, Resurrect's already useful.
Yeah.
But something like a Death Wave, for example, not typically that useful. But if you keep upgrading it, it becomes pretty good. But I don't really see the point of using any spell other than Magic Missile or Lightning Bolt still.
What about Implosion, Fire
Yeah, or
Bolt?
like, actually, one of the enemies used Inferno on me,
Yeah.
which is considered to be one of the worst spells in the game.
Yeah.
But it covers like a 7x7 circle.
Yes.
And this guy was like really good at it, and he wiped out half my army. It was just like...
There's also a hero that specializes in Inferno.
I think it was him, because no one else would learn it, because it's... Like, I've never seen that spell before in my life, I think. Like, I know it exists, but I've never actually seen it go off. It was massive. I was like, sheesh.
Okay, hero who specializes in Ragnarok.
But, like...
My Ragnarok deals 4x damage.
That might have been, like, the second or third time I've ever seen Inferno used in that game. And it's probably only ever been the AI actually use it, because it's just bad.
Country Ball Heroes actually has an interesting approach to the AoE spells, which is the bigger the AoE, the more damage they do. But the cost is way higher for mana. So basically, single target spells is, oh, I want to hit this one single target. Okay, I'll use it.
And big one is, this is going to be a quick battle. Got to do it quick.
Or these guys are all gathered together, so I'm going to hit them all at once. Or, okay, I can cast this giant AoE on a single target, and it's not really going to be worthwhile, but it's going to deal a lot of damage this one time.
But here's my magic. There's Meteor Shower.
Yes.
Like, you don't need Fireball and Inferno.
Oh, yeah, right.
And
Meteor Shower.
Because Meteor Shower you can cast on a single unit, and it's okay.
Yeah.
So it become like, I don't think their solution actually fixes the spell problem entirely, because it just... Now, I guess the thing is, if you don't get a chance to learn Magic Missile, your place only has Ice Bolt.
Yeah.
Your Ice Bolt will eventually become decent because it's the only option you have. So I guess what it is, it's not so much to balance the spells compared to each other, it's so that a Magic Hero is still equal to a Might Hero, even though they didn't get Lightning Bolts.
Well,
is probably the point.
This problem actually exists in D&D with spells. So I was thinking about 5th edition.
Yeah.
And so while I was playing a cleric, I was basically going, oh man, the wizards have way more options for damage spells than me.
Yeah.
Then I was thinking about, I have a ranged damage spell, which summons a Pillar of Flame. And it's pretty good, deals a lot of damage. And sure, I can't go, oh, I want to deal water damage, Pillar of Flame. And the wizards get that.
Yeah.
But it deals a lot of damage. And I have Harm. I have Harm and I have Inflict Wounds.
Yeah.
And sure, they're like not as flashy as the wizards, but also deals a ridiculous amount of damage. And that's like, even the flashiness of these spells, it's just different ways of dealing damage. And it's like, how many different ways of dealing damage do I need in spells in D&D? And so I was actually pretty satisfied with the amount of options clerics had. I was more like, oh, I don't have the utilities of the wizards. And then I was making a wizard for a new campaign, and I decided not to take Magic Missile and not to take Flame Bolt, which are two like basically all wizards have them.
So I took Eldritch Blast and
No, and I'm also not going to take Fireball later on. But so I substituted Flame Bolt with Bonfire, which is basically you summon a fire under people and it actually adds a piece of environment to the map. And I took Chromatic Orb instead of Magic Missile and a few other spells, but Chromatic Orb is it's not an auto hit, but deals more damage than Magic Missile. But even then, it's like sort of small damage changes. Like the diversity of spells doesn't really matter. And so I think about our first edition essentials, and I was like, wait, there's only 12 spells in this whole wizard group, and it's like,
but they're all different.
They're all different, and it's all you really need. There's the damage spell, there's the summon spell, there's the whatever.
The thing is that I think D&D started missing from starting with second edition, but it wasn't so much there, but especially third and going on, was in first edition, even though the book only showed Magic Missile, the DM was allowed to do whatever they want. I mean, they still are.
Yeah.
But I think it was more explicit in the fact that the less you give the players to work with, the more they realize, oh, we're meant to fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
So what I've done as a solution, I think that could be used by like 5th edition, for example, is when I create tables for first heroes, I actually leave gaps in them. Yeah. So I'll say like, number 1, you get this result. Number 2, you get this result. Number 3, blank. Number 4, you get... And it's to show the DM, especially, you can fill things in.
Even so, I mean, it's a great business model for 5th edition, and some people say capitalism ruins things. So they release Tasha's Cauldron of everything. So it releases more official spells, more official classes, more.
Well, that's the one
races.
I've noticed for myself is I'm shooting myself in the foot by not being able to. I can still do it technically. I can be like, look, if you're not feeling creative, here is my list of darkness dungeon, like things that the dungeon will try to do to kill you.
I mean, also, you can just add more rules.
Yeah.
Like, you could release Faith, the new Faith, and the new Horror. Like, there's Basic, and then there's with now Faith and Horror, whatever. And more mechanics.
Yeah. More fashion. Yeah. More conservative, traditional values.
But if you look at first, like the second edition player handbook we have, and the list of spells for the wizard, and the list of spells for the cleric, and the list of spells for the druids, they basically have everything that the 5th edition characters have. Like, even when they keep adding more stuff, those wizards actually still have them, and it's just a different way of looking at the spell. And even Sis, like, you can make small changes. Like, one of the recommendations in second edition is
cleric restrictions are based on your god.
Yeah, they're based on a god, but a fireball doesn't have to be a fireball.
Yeah, it could be a lightning bolt, or an ice bolt, or it could be.
Also, so there's a cleric spell in the second edition, which is called so they have Part the Seas, they have Control, they have like a bunch of them, and then those spells are all condensed in one spell in 5th edition, which is kind of like nice. But there's another spell in 1st edition which basically has 20 different effects. And then there's 20 different spells in 5th edition, which are that one. So it's sort of like some give and take, but there's just like...
Well, 5th edition has Prestidigitation, which is absurd.
Yeah.
It's like 10 first level spells into a single unlimited cast spell.
But even just like, you don't need all these things because your DM can let you do it and create them. And
I actually think Prestidigitation is like the coolest idea ever.
Yeah.
But I just think it's slightly too strong.
Yes.
But it's such a cool idea. It's just... Your wizard can do wizardly things, basically, is what it means.
Yeah.
Like, you just know things and can do things. You can't actually affect anything, but you can do a little...
There's also Thaumaturgy and Druidcraft.
Yeah.
So Thaumaturgy is more you do prophet-y things, and Druidcraft is you do weird druid stuff.
And I think if they just weakened it slightly, it'd be really cool, because it's basically... Gandalf isn't just a guy that can cast 3 spells. He's a guy that knows the secret ways, and he can just make a fire in his hand to light up and And it just...
He can grow... I mean, the thing I really like about prestidigitation is that literally you can make your voice louder, you can make yourself grow big and terrible in people's eyes, and you can darken the room. You can literally
it's Gandalf.
Yeah, you can do the Gandalf. You think me a conjurer of cheap tricks, and meanwhile you're casting a cheap trick. You're casting a cantrip.
Well, it also lets you create small flames like Gandalf with the pine cones.
Yeah. Or you can close a door. You can make a door close.
You can create small bits of light.
Yeah.
Now, that on its own is actually... For basic, that'd be super overpowered to be able to create light at will.
Yeah.
Because light is so important in basic. But something that second and I think 5th edition does this very well, but none of the other editions really do. I don't even think basic does this, is the cleric, where they have all these restrictions, but they are based on your god, and your spells are based on your god.
Yeah.
and your alignment and your god. The god is actually the DM has to be your god as a character.
Yeah.
And
it's clerics can't. It's not that clerics can't use sharp things. If you worship for D&D, if you worship Shar, you bet your bottom dollar you're going to be using knives because she's all about cutting things and making them bleed.
And in second edition, they didn't have the lore of the world, which I prefer because I don't actually like D&D lore.
Yeah.
Like I don't think it's badly written. I just think the fact of his existence is a bad thing.
Yeah, but so I mean, the god of the moon, any round weapon you can use.
That's what I did with my character. But you could second edition just says base it on your god.
Yeah.
Whereas fifth edition, I think they kind of do that. They say like you can choose a god or here's some ideas for a god.
Yeah, they have both. So they have so they say, do you want a war god? Well, here's a war god from Norse mythology, from Forgotten Realms, from Grey Hawk, from Greek mythology, from whatever. So they give you lists.
Hackmaster gives you like 20.
Yes.
But then the thing that I think fifth edition does that pretty good actually.
Yeah.
The third edition, it's like, do you want to be a water cleric, a lightning cleric, or a fire cleric? Now, here's your god, here's your spells, here's your weapons. Good day, sir. Yeah. I think they just wanted to have the rules be very clear. Mm-hmm. So it almost becomes more of a video game.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if we said this in the podcast before, but so there's an archetype of player in D&D called the rules lawyer. And I was reading this article and saying if you want to be a professional DM, you need to know the rules.
Yeah.
Now, well, that's fair in some ways. There is no book in D&D called a rule book. There is no actual game rules in D&D.
There's one. It's the first rule. It's at the start of the 5th edition book. Yeah. It says, the players state their actions. The DM says what happens. If there is doubt as to the result, the DM may roll the dice, or someone may roll dice to determine the outcome.
Yes.
That's all the rules of 5th edition.
There's one rule to D&D.
Yeah.
And like the books are very, very, very purposely named the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide.
Well, Gygax said
the Monster's manual. They're not a rule book. It's not a guide.
Well, Gygax didn't actually say he had created a game. He said, I've created an engine that other players can tweak to their own satisfaction.
Yes.
And he said in the Dungeon Master's Guide and in the Rules Cyclopedia, here's what I did that worked for me. I came up with this with a lot of trial and error, so don't deviate from this lightly. Yeah. He basically said, look, you do whatever you want, but you're going to make a lot of mistakes that I made, so here's what I did that doesn't have mistakes.
Yeah, so try works.
That. Yeah. One thing I kind of want to do for First Heroes, I don't know if this is a bad idea or not, is I want to put near the end or something.
Yeah.
Like, and do this truthfully, like not make it a lie, but 0 to 3 rules in this rule book I don't think should be followed. It is up to you to determine which ones those are. To give the idea, put doubt in the DM's mind that, oh, this is so boring. I don't get why I have to keep track of this. And then just, wait, that's got to be one of those rules.
Well, there's this concept of AD&D, which the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Player Handbooks, those things are intimidating. Like, they have a lot of graphs, they have a lot of things in them. And, I mean, if you play 2nd edition with an old hand at 2nd edition, you're not going to have to deal with half those things, like siege mechanics. I've never touched siege mechanics.
And if you do a siege, it's there.
Yeah, it's there.
That's the point. It's meant to be a reference, not a rule book.
Yeah, and in 5th edition, it's like, actually, there's this rule here, and I feel like if you're a DM, and you have someone that says, actually, there's several things. You can give them a death glare, and just sort of go, I'm the DM. You can go, interesting point, and then completely ignore it.
Well, I like Hackmaster actually has rules for that. Do you remember that? Where you're allowed to spend 1 minute arguing your case once per session with the DM.
Yeah.
But after that point, the DM can choose whatever they want, and you have to go along with it.
Yes.
That's explicitly stated in the rules. The other thing Hackmaster does is it actually has the rules of the game, and then things it calls advanced rules.
Yeah.
And advanced rules are not rules for experienced players. They are rules that you add in if you want that aspect. So, for example, flanking, weapon damage, there's a huge amount of them.
Yeah.
But basically it's, it'd be really cool if every time you pierced a shield, it actually broke the shield. And it's like, well, here's the rules for that. But don't use this unless you want to do that.
Yeah, so, I mean, in the campaign I'm running, I've realized there's this very, very big flaw with D&D, especially if you have a cleric in your party or people that can heal. So you're in combat in D&D, and you go down, and your cleric heals you, and you get back up and you keep fighting.
Yeah.
And you go down, your cleric heals you, you get back up again. And you're sort of like jumping back and forth between life and death. Or you have a massive fight, you're knocked down, you get up, you're healed to full. And then you're just walking around 5, and you're like near life death experience. And there's a mechanic in D&D called disadvantage. Sorry, not disadvantage. It's called exhaustion. And 1 level exhaustion gives you disadvantage on all rolls. I don't know what 2 levels exhaustion does to you. 3 levels exhaustion is really bad to have, because at 4, you're instantly dead. And so, I basically add in, if you're ever knocked down and you get up again, you have a level exhaustion. And so my players, a lot of times, like, they just want a long rest anyways. And, you know, in Baldur's Gate, like, oh, the combat's over, I'm going long rest. There's another thing in D&D, which is a rule which,
Can't sleep unless you're tired.
well, it is that. You can only have a long rest every 24 hours. And so I'm starting to tell them that's like, I want to take a long rest. Like, you guys actually can't take a long rest. Like, you've already had one. You can't rest again. Like,
see, if you have a system for keeping track of food and time, that doesn't matter, because if the players want to sleep their life away, go ahead.
Well,
but
I actually did. I added a system for keeping track of time, and I'm going to start keeping track of food as well. I'm trying to like ease them into it. So,
but it's also hard to sleep if you've already slept. So
yeah. So like, there's multiple things. Like, you can't just sleep in the middle of nowhere, or more accurately, because they think a long rest is just, oh, I'm going to long rest and I'm going to be good again. Like, sometimes one party member will go, I'm going to long rest, and the others ones want to keep going. And so it's like, all right, the rest of them keep going. And then the person's like, so is my long rest over? Can I join the rest of the party? It's like, a long rest is 8 hours. Like, no, you're long resting. Like, and it sucks for you, but you're long resting.
I think if they're new, you should explain that to them.
Yeah, no, I do. Yeah. I have been. But also, so a combat happened, and the enemy was retreating. And so everyone took a long rest. And then the bandits are just like, what the heck? And so the bandits walked over and kidnapped one of the party members, hogtied them. I was like, all right, they're going to roll to hogtie you. And the bandit got 20. So the person's just tied up, and the bandit's just dragging them off all happy. And then one of the party members who wasn't long resting, was just doing stuff, like, he's just getting dragged up, and everyone else is just asleep, because like, nope, these guys are long resting. It's like, can I go and notice that he's getting dragged off? You're taking a long rest. You don't notice nothing. You're asleep.
So it's funny, but I wonder about, and the context here matters, so I don't know the full context, but it seems to me that if you say the bandits retreat, the assumption is, okay, they're gone, we've picked over the bodies, now we're going to rest. Like, not that, oh, they've turned around, let's immediately set up camp and fall asleep.
That's literally what they did. They turned around, like,
but how do the players determine how far away the bandits are? Because time is subjective, right?
Because, so, combat is 1 turn over, and they can literally see where the bandits are. They could continue to trade. So I have a battle map.
Yeah.
So the bandits are on the map. And I'm saying these bandits are running. And then immediately after the point, they're like, I'm going long rest because I'm hurt and out of spells.
Wouldn't the assumption be, once the bandits are out of sight, I rest?
But the bandits aren't even out of sight.
No, but wouldn't the assumption be that the players are saying, once the bandits are out of sight, I like, it's not a video game where you need to look at the map constantly. You assume the battle's over, and so the bandits may be gone. Because it would be ridiculous to fall asleep with bandits right there.
Given them, I'm trying. they do that.
And the second aspect is, a long rest in D&D is not
8 hours of sleep.
Knocked out, blackout sleep. It's sitting around a fire, repairing your gear, cooking food, talking with your friends, meditating, praying, and also napping and sleeping. Yeah. It's not actually just, like, that's 5th edition. Yes. It says that a long rest is...
Yeah, I know.
And for different classes and species, like... But I don't think warlocks actually sleep.
So that's the game rules, but in the situation there, I made the active decision from a storytelling narrative. These people, I haven't said the bandits have left. I said the bandits are in retreat, and they're a distance away from you. So the bandits have, like, run maybe 50 feet away. You can choose to chase them, you can loot the bodies, you can set up camp, whatever. And they tell me, half of them tell me, that are like nearby, I want my spell back, I'm going to take a long rest. And I ask them, okay, the bandits are still over them, there. Yeah. So no, I'm going to take a long rest.
Okay, then in that case, yeah.
And so they take a long rest. And I think, this is funny, The bandit, like, in the situation, if someone just, like, fell over face first, like, a bandit who's in retreat might just go, wait a minute, and, like, walk over and poke them a bit and then go, huh, and tie them up and then try to carry them off because it could be worthwhile to have a prisoner.
Seems like a very Captain Carrot sort of thing, almost.
Yeah.
Just like, yeah, oh, the enemy's running.
Yeah.
Gotta get your rest while you can.
Yeah, no, a lot of this campaign so far has been me, I don't know, almost trying to teach these people that D&D is a living, like, how I want to be a living world where what they're doing, sort of things like happen and change. Yeah. And that's why I'm trying to keep track of time. I'm trying to take lessons from our playing the first edition, like the essentials. And one thing that happened, and I'm a little worried about it, and I hope that starting characters at level 1 will address this, although I'm worried it might cause a cascade in a different way, is one of my players really, really likes making characters. And because he likes making characters...
I have the game for them.
Well, because he likes making characters, he takes risks. It's called fate. No. He takes risks. But also, like, he gets bored of his characters because I think he makes his character with a thought of them mechanically. He doesn't think about their story, what's going to happen to them. And so he's very much of the mind, I'm going to have my character die. Like, he did this stupid risk where he jumped over gaps in the void because they're basically in a void realm. And then he fell through the void and it's like, oh boy, I'm going to make my new character. Like, he's basically, like, I almost, like, realized, he's basically, like, killing his character.
As long as everyone's having fun, I guess.
As long as everyone's having fun.
I think. Like, I might be wrong there, but I think as long as everyone's having fun.
Well, yeah, as everyone's having fun. But I have had experience with people doing this in my games before, because I actually have DM'd for a lot of people. And they start getting bored of every single character, and it just turns into, I want to make a new one, I want to play it, I want to make a new one, I want to do it. And the rest of the party has no investment in that character, and at certain points, like, why are we accepting every single random Joe that shows up? And
it's also,
you have no living aspect in the world. And so I hope that basically saying you're going to be at level 1 and have to catch up to the party will sort of be a thing, like, you're not going to have all the cool stuff that you want in the future because you're not going to immediately be level 3 with everyone else. But also have the worry that he's just going to keep making characters like, I'm not high level, so this character's boring, so I'm going to switch because he doesn't have cool abilities. But also there will be a certain point where if he persists in this mindset and the rest of the party's level 10 and he has a level 1 character coming in every twice per session, he's actually going to run through every possibility that's actually interesting in D&D and run out of characters to a point where he will have to invest in one of them.
It's also potentially a sign that he's not engaged in some way.
Yeah. Well, I think he's engaged. I think he's bored with the concept of his character, which I've felt that too, and so...
I think concentration is an important... How to put it? Like, concentration is an important ability to cultivate, and it is something you need to cultivate.
Yeah.
So if when you watch a YouTube video, you need to have a second one open, and you need to be playing Minecraft, and then suddenly you need to be switching videos constantly, and this one's boring, and this one... Right. So you're doing a whole bunch at once.
Yeah.
And it's like eating sugar. You need more and more to keep going.
Yeah.
And so you need more and more engagement and stimuli. Whereas if you focus down and play just Minecraft, let's say, you can actually eventually, like, it might be hard at first, but you can actually learn to live in the moment and enjoy what you're doing.
I have a really good example of this. So because I basically haven't worked for the past 2 years during the month of December. And I try to avoid work actually during December because I want to watch the Jingle Jam.
Right.
And, like, there's certain shows on I want to watch. Like, some things I can't care less, and so I'll do something else that day. But there's certain things I really want to see. And this year I basically missed all of it, and so I have to watch the reruns of it.
Yeah.
But since I'm watching them, I have control over the player, and so I can fast forward and jump through them. And I wasn't actually enjoying as much because, like, just going to, like, move forward here, going to move forward. And I didn't, like, get the little moments of just sitting there and, like, enjoying watching the show that I don't have any control over. And so I've actively made the decision during watching the Fighting Fantasy, which is my favorite one, which is I am not going to touch the player. It's just going to play, and the only thing I can do is pause it, press play, or turn it off because I'm done.
Yeah. No, that'll...
And I made that decision. I've been enjoying it far more because it's like, no, get over your minor moment of boredom because you miss stuff. It's far more worthwhile to just sit there and watch it.
The mindset, I think, it flips back and forth, like... those two options.
Yeah.
It flips between, this is something I need to get done because it's what I do.
Yes.
So I'm going to I skipped a bit. Oh, I'll skip a bit. Oh, this section's a bit slow. So it's like,
Yeah.
and then what you get into the mindset is, I got to finish this video, and then it becomes a chore.
Yes.
Versus, oh boy, there's still 3 hours left. Like
Yeah.
I got to luxuriate in this, and you do that to yourself through because your brain reads the actions of what you're doing and says, oh, this must be a chore to get through. And so with the player, I don't really see a risk of that almost, but I wonder if it becomes like, oh, he's still alive. He's got to. I got that itch. I gotta get him dead. I think I have the thing with video games actually where I will 50 to 95% complete a game, and then I'll lose all interest. Yeah. Like I don't want to complete it, and it's almost because I don't want. It's not that I'm like, oh, it'll be done and I'll be sad. I'm not that kind of person. When I finish a game, I feel nothing.
Yes, I feel nothing.
And typically, I don't play games that you can finish. I like to play games that are very repetitive, repeatable.
Yeah.
But I think there's also an aspect to it, and it happens to me with books and movies and TV series. It happens to me with everything. I think it's scary to commit to something, and you are committing to finishing something. Yeah. It's very weird. Like, it's so basic in a way, but it's you are committing to the entire action.
So, like the advice that D&D book gave me, which I've basically made my players do ever since I read it, and I mean, for some people, they sort of roll their eyes and be like, really, do I have to go through this? But, like, D&D is a source story. Like, me and you, I trust myself and I trust you that in our, like, thing, we're going to create the story behind these guys, so we don't need to make a backstory. We don't need to basically artificially create investment in them.
Yeah. Because
also their lives are so fragile that if they die, it kind of sucks, because we don't want our boys to die. But with my players in D&D, it's like they're a new player, I don't know how I'm going to approach it, and almost like a protection against the I'm going to kill my player character to make a new one.
Is to make them like them more.
Is to make them like them. To make someone like them, I make them do work on their character. And part of that is literally going through an exercise of what is your backstory? What is your investment in the world? What is your connections? Like, go through that whole list of things and like what happened to this person. Like, making a story about them. I know you're sort of like iffy on backstory.
I'm really against it, but
but
I think
I want to give the person an investment in this character more beyond that they're just someone who appeared out of nowhere. Like, I want them to feel that they're connected a bit to this character and they're alive.
So,
but I haven't done that with my latest group because they're so new to D&D in some aspects that they're just playing the game. I want them to have fun playing the game.
You don't want to ruin it with backstory.
Well, no, so I don't want... There's different levels of play, and they're there to play the game. Like, literally play the game. They're, like, they role-play a bit, they solve the mystery, they go about, then they play the game. They fight the monster, they get the loot, they go about, they want to do things, and they want to sort of be on an adventure that is a lot more steered. Like, basically, I'm telling them, these are the things you can do next, and they go do them. They're not going, I want to go hunt a dragon. How can I do that?
Yeah.
You. What?
Oh, that kind of gameplay sounds terrible to me.
I'm just saying.
No, just like, I'm obviously a person that likes the direction as well.
Yeah. Or, like, I've experienced both kinds of groups. Like, I want this is the sort of story I want for my character.
I don't care what you want.
Yeah.
The world is cold and uncaring.
Yeah, but this is sort of like what I like what I prefer to play and do as a DM is, okay, so this is the world. This is what's happening right now in the world. This is what's happening to you. So you can choose to go along with it, or things will keep happening to you. And along the way, if your character has some sort of like history in this world, because people do need a history in the world, no matter how minor it is, you might encounter more of your history and make new things. But for these people, it's basically, all right, option A, option B, option C. What do you want to do? And that seems to be the best to get a response out of them. That's what they like the most. So that's what I'm trying to run with. And doing the sort of role-playing around stuff and more open doesn't work for this group.
You know, it's funny because the idea of here's the world, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
Is the freedom in the real world, which I was advocating for in the previous episode.
Yeah.
Which I am against in the role-playing game. Maybe it's because... Okay, so here's the thing, right? Games are a way of experiencing the world differently, to a degree. Yeah. Like, art is a way of experiencing the world differently. That's one aspect of art, right? So a person who lives a virtuous life of self-determination will play games of railroading, whereas people who live lives of slavery will want to play games of freedom. So in order to be free, you must play as a slave.
I don't know about that. I think it's
the same reason that like
I think that a group of D&D players,
businessmen like getting spanked.
I think what it is actually is a lot of people just play the game differently. Like I've played with Jonas, talked about him before. I've played with my friends. I played with these kids.
You've played with my friends.
Yes, I've played with your friends. I've played with random people from school. I've played with people from universities. I've played with people at conventions. And each group has different things they want and get out of the game. And even within a group, there's different wants and things within the group. Like, there's one player, he's adorable. All he wants is to get as much treasure as possible. And the rest of the party is slowly getting more and more wound up that he'll literally abandon them to go get treasure. And now that would be fine if he was playing a rogue, but he's the cleric of the party. And it is just hilarious how... So I basically told him, like, in this one point, like, in the Void realm, so there was this floating block, and there's treasure on it. And I basically said, you have to make a dex check here. And if you fail, you will die. And it's simple. You make one check, and if you fail, you die. Now, they could have tied ropes to people, they could have thought through more, or whatever, and they could have made bridges, whatever. But he jumped across, he gathered the treasure, he jumped across again. Then he saw more treasure off in the distance because it's open void, you can see things. There's a giant tentacle monster in the way. He thought, I'm going to run past this tentacle monster and get the treasure. Now his other two party members are, he's going to run and get the treasure. There's a tentacle monster there. So we have to run forward along with him. We'll all fight the tentacle monster together. Then all three of us will get the treasure while the other two are doing whatever. They run forward, attack the tentacle monster. While they're fighting it, he runs away from the tentacle monster, jumps to the platform of the treasure, and gathers that up as well.
Well, you and I play Divinity Original Sin.
Yes.
And, like, we're playing on the hardest mode.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times, we're barely scraping through the fight. And then one of us will use their entire turn to run over and get the loot first.
Yes. But so I recognize that, and so that's why it's like there is sort of things where it's like, eventually, there already has been, like, bad things that happen to him. But he keeps doing it, and so it's like, okay, this is the way he's playing. Another person...
That's role-playing.
Yeah, it's role-playing. Another person, she's very quiet. And I feel like she wants to play, and she wants to be... But she's just very quiet in personality, and it's kind of hard over video. Like, I can't engage with her more and make eye contact and stuff, especially when there's no video. It's like, what do you want to do? And she won't say, I attack the monster with my sword, I walk over to this or whatever. She says, I kill the monster. And I go, like, sort of, no, the stack noise, like the phone's like, so you're going to hit the monster with your sword? Yes. All right. So you hit the monster with your sword. But she's very much what she
End result.
Yeah, end result. Like, what do you want to do here? And I give her a list of all. Like, sometimes I'll give her a list of options when she's uncertain. It's like, do you want to, like, fight the monster? And she's playing with two of her brothers. So it's like, do you want to fight the monster? Do you want to punch your brother? Do you want to go take a nap? Do you want to go get this treasure? And she'll sit there and think. Then she goes, yeah, I'll punch my brother. It's like she's choosing basically what she thinks is the funnest thing to do.
You all meet in a tavern. What do? I choose the prestige class of Spellblade. Okay, but I kill all the monsters. Right, okay, back up. Yeah, back it up a little. I kill all the monsters. Back it up a little bit more. I go to all their places and kill. Okay, back it up just a little bit more.
And another one of the players is very much like the guy who wants to like keep going through. He's how I can tell he's engaged is he's interested in the world and he's going through all the things. He just wants to play a different character. Also, he did start with a paladin. I mean, paladins in 5th edition are kind of limited and boring. Well, it depends on who you are, because paladin actually is the only character in the game which their abilities are based on role playing. If they have oaths they have to take, and if they break them, they lose their.
I find that to be. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. I find that to be the most interesting thing.
Yeah, no, they are, but I mean, for some people, they're like, "Oh, this is so stifling."
Yeah, it's individual, but as you can tell with my game, I love the idea of limitations on the I can't walk, and I have to only eat the color green, and I have to wear these specific. Like, I love that.
Yeah.
And the thing I try to do in my creation is make give the players a reason to do it rather than just be annoyed.
Yeah.
So I give you a benefit if you take a negative. And the benefit for a paladin is being a paladin, especially in second edition and first edition. I don't think first edition has paladins, but the idea is the same.
Yeah.
If you have 17 charisma in first or second edition, what was the math? Well, no. So a paladin at lowest charisma never has a hostile encounter.
Yeah.
Because 17 charisma is enough to never have a hostile encounter. You can have wary encounters, but you will never be attacked outright by anything.
Unless it's evil.
Unless it's like undead or evil or in second edition, I think things you can't speak to.
Yeah.
So actually, in second edition, you can only do a reaction roll with things you know the language of.
Yeah.
So the goal of a paladin is to have as high intelligence as possible, so that you know as many languages as possible, and then you never have to fight. I think the reaction chart is actually really cool.
Although, one very unfortunate thing which I did realize is, so the party does have a MacGuffin sort of thing on a quest right now. They're trying to destroy an evil item.
Yeah.
And the paladin who fell off the edge at the, void, I realized actually had the item on him.
Well, make it like super evil, like it appears in their pocket the next day. Just like,
so,
it can only be destroyed or lost with an intent of will.
Yeah, well, so the thing that happened is, so the cleric who is obsessed with collecting as much loot as he can, even if he can't use the item, he will still have a magic sword. Even if someone else needs it, he will want to have it because it's his. Is he actually thought he still had the evil dagger on him, even though he didn't? And so I basically said, so yeah, the cleric pickpocketed the paladin at some point, actually has the evil knife on him, because that's something he would do. Like, it's like the One Ring, like he's like, I must have it. It's a lovely game in some ways. If you don't let the rules get in the way of D&D, and you set sort of ground rules. That's it. You set ground rules and you use the game as ground rules, but you set the ground rules, but then you don't let those rules get in the way, and you make it the most enjoyable game / storytelling engine for the group of people who can. It could be very rewarding and very fun and really cool.
Something I noticed, I have that book, well, you have that book I gave you on how to be a great DM, I think it's called, or something like that. And I was looking through your Reginald character, Reginald Hansworth, and there's all the stuff I did from the recommendations of that book, like having a mob sheet where you have a bunch of pre-made characters just ready to go, and keeping track of every action the character does, so that you have a record of what they've done, and keeping track of just this sheet of NPC, like quick NPCs. So here's a defining characteristic, here's their sex.
Things you're keeping care of.
Yeah.
Keeping track,
But it's like stuff you do ahead of time. So you create a sheet that just has like 20 names on it, and their sexes and one character. So this guy's a limp, this guy's a green eye, this one green eye and one blue. This guy has black hair with a white stripe in it. You just create a list so you don't have to think on the fly. You're just like, okay, there's 6 bandits. One of them is this, one of them is this, and keeps it a bit more interesting. And there's also like the NPCs. This NPC has a way of talking like this. They have this accent. They have a habit of always repeating the word "the" twice.
Yeah.
How's the weather? Something like that. And they are the head guard. And so you have this list of NPCs that are like a bit more in depth and good to go. And then there's this record of everything the character's done. So you say, okay, at this time they did this, and you keep this massive record. And there was a bunch of tips like that all throughout the book. And so when we played first edition, we didn't do any of that stuff, and it was suddenly so much better. I was like, wow, this is the game I always wanted to play.
Yeah.
Well, basic, sorry, not first edition.
Yeah.
When we played basic, I was like, this is the game I've always wanted to play. But I was going through Reginald's thing, and I was thinking, these are really good ideas, like all these the mob sheet and all that. But so if I could, I would implement them in our first edition game.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about it, and it's similar to modding a game like Rimworld or Skyrim.
Yeah.
There is a lot of mods you could add to a game, but there's a limit to the number of mods you can add, and there's a stability issue. So given that, don't add the things that take a huge amount of overhead for little to no reward. So it would be really cool to have this little mob sheet, right?
Yeah.
But I don't actually care what the enemies look like, really.
No.
Like, I don't care. But if I was a player who did care, I would add that in and get rid of our maybe I'd get rid of our dismemberment system, or I'd get rid of our weapon breaking system.
Yeah.
So I think really what D&D should do at the end of the day is give you a very stripped down rule set, and then say, here are some great ideas. Only pick like 3 of them, because you can't handle all of them.
Yeah, well, I've been ignoring a lot of rules for these kids because they don't need those rules. That's not what they're there for. That's not what they're playing the game for with me. Like, they don't need these rules. They're going with
I think a lot of where D&D has gone is it's abandoning logistics. Like, no more food, no more encumbrance, no more torches, and a lot more, this is my character's backstory, this is my OC that I'm going to insert and wax lyrical about and be a pretty fairy princess or what, and just bring everyone down with my Mary Sue that I'm and so, you know, different tastes for different people. Like there's people that just like a good solid mechanics that they want to keep that allow for engaging in dynamic gameplay, and there's people that prefer, you know, being arrogant, self-centered types who just want to talk about their own creative world over and over.
So,
and it's, you know,
they have a magic item in the party. This is an example of on the fly DMing. So they have a magic item in the party called Stoneheart. There's a sword. Yeah. It's a magic sword that is sentient.
And a book.
Yeah, it's a book as well. But it's a sentient sword. And it's basically Nightblood, but holy. Instead of like being weird, evil slave.
Nightblood's good.
Yeah. But it's like actually charged with holy energy.
I mean, Nightblood kind of is. It's charged with souls.
Yeah. So this sword wants to kill undead and it wants to kill darkness.
Yeah.
And it can only be wielded by people with good intent, and if you misuse it, then you can never use the sword again. And when they first drew the sword, it's really happy to be drawn, and it would basically scream at things, and all the evil things in the area were taking psychic damage, so they're getting hurt by it. And one of the party members was an undead darkness creature, and so the sword was slowly killing him by the screaming. But that's not part of its rules. It's just sort of like, I had this idea, okay, this is what the sword's going to do. So later on, when they're fighting monsters in the void, the elf fighter who's wielding Stoneheart asks it, can you do that psychic scream again? Because there's a ton of enemies around and I want to take them out. And so I was like, sure, why not? And I was like, everyone make a wisdom saving throw. And so everyone did. And this sword is indiscriminate. Like, it's not ability written down anywhere. I have very like specific rules about the sword, but it's like, this is something I sort of established the sword can do. And so the player thought, hey, this sword can do this, so I'm going to ask it, can it scream? And so it did that, and it did more damage than all the monsters in the encounter did to the party by like hitting everything in the area with a psychic scream, because it's kind of like a arcane, insane item that's going to hurt everything when it does that. But it's sort of, I just said, yeah, it can do that, because I've said it can do this before, even though it's not in the rules. And it's like, if I was being strict, it's like, no, that was just something it did when it first appeared.
What rules? Like, is this an item that exists somewhere, or?
I wrote down the rules for the item.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But this isn't like if someone else I know was the DM, they would have, alright, this sword has an active ability it can use once per day, that it can use a psychic scream. So they would add that as a rule. As if someone's like, oh, can I use this psychic scream? And it's like, no, you can't make the sword do that. It's something it does on its own accord. Whereas I just rolled with it.
Tom from the Yogs, Tom Clark.
Yeah.
Tom Clark without an E?
Yes.
I think they have 2 Clark. Angry Tom.
Yeah.
He does something very interesting when he's DMing that I've noticed, which is, and I'm not saying, like, there's multiple styles, and I'm not saying it's the best one. I'm not even sure if I would like it myself or not. But whenever he's asked something, his response is yes, but. So they'll say, like for their Star Wars campaign, for example, they're in the middle of nowhere, they find this guy's shed, and they say, is there a speeder in his, like, out back? And he's like, yes, but, you know, it's broken down, but you might be able to repair it, but he's not going to give it to you. And so then they find a way to get it, and then they have it. And whenever players want to do anything, he basically gives it to them. Yeah. But he throws in a little something. Yeah. So you might say, is there a... So you're in combat, and you come up with a clever idea. And you're like, is there a pool of water nearby? Because you're going to do something crazy with an ice spell. And so if you ask that to Tom, he'll always say, "Yeah, there's one on the far side of the room," or "Yeah, there's one just behind you." Like he won't hand it to you on a silver platter, but he'll give you whatever you want. And I think that is kind of neat.
Well, so the case with that sword is his intention was to use the scream to hurt the monster.
Well, you're talking. Like, the thing is, it's not a game about rules, so I guess that's why your example isn't working for me, because it's like, well, duh.
Yeah, well, but his intention was use the scream to hurt the monster. But I was like, he's asking the sword to do something outside of its design, like as a magic, it's something it can do, which is psychically scream, but that's because it's insane, and it can speak in people's minds. And so his intention with this was make the sword hurt this thing from a range because it's a powerful magic item. I did, okay, it does that, but it hurts everyone.
Yeah, but it D&D is not a board game. It's not a computer game, right? So,
but I've played with a lot of DMs as well, and they treat it like those two things.
But if let's say we're playing a game with us, right?
Yeah.
And there's a magic sword that can talk and can cast spells and scream and whatnot. It would be totally reasonable to, like, if you were controlling the sword and I was like, yeah, can I get to scream? You'd be like, well, yeah, that's part of its nature.
Yeah.
Or if I was writing a book and the characters were trapped and I had one of them talk to each other and said, hey, can you scream? And the sword was like, yeah. Like, if that's in a book, it's like, yeah, sure, that it's part of the world. Or if you're reading a fairy tale, you're like, yeah, that makes sense, sure. So there's no reason why that shouldn't work in D&D as well.
Yeah, it's just, I guess it's weird because I've also played with a lot of different DMs, and, like, I know from experience many of them, they would say no. Like, there's a case which, so my character in the campaign, like, this was a stretch, and I basically had to say, please, can I do this? And he's like, okay, fine. He had 2 different magic cloaks on. And in my mind, it made perfect sense that you...
The reason that in D&D, like, isn't there the idea of the imbuing or something of...
Yeah, well, there's the imbuing of things. However, I had enough imbuing sort of slots that I could wear multiple clothes.
But then you're just asking for special privileges, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's different.
Well, there's also the case, so, like, I had a magic shield, and I had a shield that's made of mithril. And I realized that there's no point for my character to use a mace. And, like, in my mind, it's like, this guy, weapons are useless for him. Like, he's a cleric, he touches things, he casts spells. It's far more reasonable for him to be using both shields. And so I said, can you use both shields? And the DM had to think about it for a while. It's like, alright, he doesn't get, like, defensive bonus from both shields, but he can use both their actives because that's something to do. But, like, it took him a while to think about that, whereas...
Well, I think there's also the aspect of, like, do you have to manipulate your fingers and whatnot? So I think saying yes, but there would be a perfect example.
Yeah, no, there was a yes, but there. And with the cloaks, it sort of took us a lot of discussion. Then we also found out that 5th edition's weird, that they... cloaks are the only item of clothing that you can actually, like, wear 100 cloaks as long as you have the carry capacity and get the benefit from every single one, because there's the rules are
right. But I think on the opposite end of not following the rules but following the spirit of the rules, I would say no, you can't wear 2 magic cloaks because you are bound to the magic item and it will not accept a second cloak.
Yeah, well,
like, you have to make that choice yourself to the magic item.
So my thought with these cloaks, though, so one of the cloaks was a cloak of protection, and the other was a displacer cloak. So the cloak of protection was being worn underneath, and so it's like chainmail. And the displacer cloak gives you camouflage on the outside, because it makes you hard to see.
The nature of the cloak of protection is to protect, and that is inimical to the nature of the cloak of displacement, which is to hide.
Yeah.
And so you cannot... Because they're semi-sentient beings in D&D, right?
Yeah.
And you have to actually bond with them in 5th edition. So,
well, with more powerful items, you have to bond. These are weaker ones.
So I think you cannot have the nature of protection and hiding together because, well, I mean, like, then you'd be like any lizard or beetle out there, but it's impossible. Then you would need the cloak of displacement and protection. The displacer's cloak of protection.
Well, we sort of decided they were one and the same. Like, we talked it through, but still, there's, like...
It's... And if it worked out, it worked out.
It worked out, but I have had DMs where they're very much like, nope, this is the rule, and it's like, but this makes sense, but this is the rule, but this is how it's written.
And that's the same idea of the spirit, not the letter. Like, look at the moon, not the finger. Look at the that's a lot of the reason these secret societies that I've talked about in the previous episodes actually didn't tell anyone anything. Like, that's the reason they're secret in the first place, is because they didn't want people worshipping their lessons and their drawings and their... Like, it already happened. Like, there's people that do horoscopes and whatnot, but that's not the point of astrology.
Yeah.
And there's people that talk about the chakras and the crystal healing crystals, and those were things and are things, but you're missing the point if you think you can wave your hand in a specific way and decipher the secrets of the universe.
Yeah.
Or if you can...
Or there's...
The Bible's full of numbers that actually mean things. Like, the word God is written 32 times in the opening of Genesis. In Genesis, where God is written 32 times, because 32 is a very significant number.
Yeah.
And the word Adam is a combination of the first 4 letters of a sentence, meaning Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and different angel, which is a sign saying, like, God is all that there is. And if you reverse the first sentence of, like, Genesis, you get the word God. Like, there is a huge... It's actually basically impossible to translate, but the Bible is...
a giant hidden puzzle book.
Yeah, but it also reinforces itself. It says, if you find this, then you understand what we're talking about. Like, if you notice the 32 things, that in itself has no significance, except that it means you get the point that 32 is sacred. And so, like, the idea of 32 being sacred, I'm not sure why it is, but there tends to be a reason for these things.
Yeah.
I might not know it, but if you... So even I don't really...
Days of the month?
I don't think so. But like...
Lunar cycle, something else.
So for example, the sign of Mercury, if you see it somewhere, is a representation of creation and the Trinity, because the divine Mercury is made up of mercury, salt, and sulfur. Yeah. And that is the same as the Son, the Father, and the Holy Ghost. Yeah. So the sign, if you see the sign of Mercury somewhere, that is a representation of the origin of the eternal, that the point of eternity, that is the core of God, let's say. Yeah. And so if you saw a reference to the first letter of each word in this sentence makes the word Mercury. Yeah. That'd be, this is a sentence that is divine because it's referencing eternity. Yeah. So there's a lot of that in there. But the thing that happens is people then say, well, I predicted the end of the world because if you add up the numerical values of all of these, then you get that the end times would be. So, and that's why they're secret, because they didn't want people doing that. Yeah. They wanted the lessons to actually get people to think for themselves rather than to invest in the idols, I guess, the false idols. So I think D&D has had a very similar issue, actually.
Actually, that's something I really like about Christianity versus both Judaism and Islamic ideology. So both, so Judaism, is that the religion? I don't know.
Don't know. Definitely depends what you're talking about.
Like the Quran, the Torah.
Yeah.
So there's no graven images.
Right.
So that is, don't have like statues of naked men and women, and don't have like pictures of God and stuff like that. And then in Islam, they have, you can't show the prophet, you can't show pictures of God because it can't be captured.
Yeah, sort of. A lot of the Islamic stuff isn't from the original teachings. Yeah. It's being tacked on, kind of like Catholicism.
Yeah. The Catholicism has...
Christianity.
Yeah, Christianity has false idols. No false idols. You can have idols as long as they're not false, and I like that.
I guess. Now, the thing about Judaism is there's a lot more books than the Bible for them. And those books are not the story of this is what happened, this is what is. They are collections of scribblings in the margins, essentially, of other scribblings in the margins. Basically, it's a giant forum.
Yes.
A giant written forum.
Well, I mean, there's we talked about this before, where it's like, hey, God, what if there's 100 innocent people in Sodom and Gomorrah? Okay, I won't destroy it if there's 100 innocent people. What if there's 10? Okay, if there's 10, I won't destroy it. What if there's one innocent person? Fine, if there's one innocent person, I will not destroy them all. Sweet, I'm going to go and find an innocent person. What? Yep, off to find an innocent person.
But it's a conversation. It's not even. It's an argument with God and each other.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're willing to argue over God about the fate of a whole city of
I think
sinners,
the even better example is when the imams are arguing.
Yeah.
Not the imams, the rabbi. Sorry, imams is Islam.
Yeah.
That the rabbi are arguing, and they are saying, no, it says in the Bible, like, or I don't think it was the Bible, but it says in like this holy book, this is what we need to do in this situation. And they said, but that, it doesn't make sense for the time. It's like, no, it says this can't be changed. And then God comes down and he says, no, the other guys are right. It's don't follow what's in the book. And then they're like, no, you said here that don't take anything I say over what I ordered to be written. And God says, I am so proud of my children, for they have defeated me. They win the argument about God's word with God himself. It's like, it's I think so. I really appreciate that aspect of Islam, to adapt and change.
Judaism?
Yeah, Judaism. Yeah. No, Islam isn't so much a religion as a tool, I think, in some sense. It's a very effective tool.
A very funny...
I think a lot of people treat it as a religion, but I think it is also... It probably is a religion to some extent, but it's also a very effective self-propagating meme, which is what religions are, but it is...
meant to be one. Instead of religion is a collection of ideas and stories.
It's not the idea that won when all the others faded. It was custom built to be unstoppable. Yeah. And it's done a very good job of that. Now that could be because it has a lot of good ideas. But it's also just kind of built. It's like the difference between YouTube in 2007, where people are like, whoa, have you seen this video? And everyone sees it, versus someone purposely making a finely crafted video to...
deck building game. So one religion could be just a really, really well-built deck, whereas it is basically a deck that's designed to be good and self-propagating, and it's like put together.
Yeah, well, I think one would be like, all my cards happen to be good. Yeah. So I went, like, everyone just comes to the tournament with a random deck of cards. Yeah. And the guy that had the random deck that was the best won. Yeah. And then a new kid came along with a deck he actually built. Yeah. And it just started trashing everyone, except for the luckiest decks, like Christianity and Buddhism. Yeah. And
one of the funny things, though, I heard from Imam with Islam is, so he's getting asked questions by non-Muslims. And one of the questions I was asked to him was, do all Muslims have to have beards? And he turned to the guy he's talking with. He's like, do all Muslims need to have beards? And the guy looks at him, no. He's like, yeah, no, women don't have to have beards. And then, but don't you hate it when your wife's beard is better than yours? Like, yeah, no, it really sucks. It's just so luxurious and long. But just the simplest of that joke was just really cool. It's like, do all Muslims have to have beards? It's like, yeah, the women don't.
Yeah, it's well, that's kind of the funny thing, isn't it? That, like, people are always people, eh? Yeah. Even the austere, because it's a very regimental religion. Like, it has what's right and wrong very clear. There's no arguing with Islam, really. Yeah. But even then, you can still have fun within it, because people are people. Yeah. You won't go against the Quran, but you will still have fun with the words of it. Yeah. You'll still be a human being. Like, I mean, even look at, like, the Taliban, right? Yeah. They have a Twitter account where they post memes about them conquering an area and overthrowing it. Like, what they're doing cannot be overstated as being anything but horrible to quite a large degree. Yeah. But they're still people making jokes and memes like everyone else.
Well, I mean, another thing is, you had a bunch of guys basically living in the desert for, the past 10 years?
Well, 20.
Yeah, the past 20 years. And then they come back to civilization, and civilization's different. And they're like, what the heck? And so they ride about in bumper cars because they'd be in the desert for 20 years. And now
they go in their little swan pond with their swan boats. And, like, because they weren't fighting to be austere tyrants. They were fighting to get their way. Yeah. And they still want to have fun and be human beings. Yeah. They just want to tell people how to do it. Yeah. And the rest of the world, except China, disagrees. Mm-hmm. And China probably doesn't even agree either. They just think it's convenient. Yeah. So, well, and Biden apparently agrees because he armed them all. But, and that's the only reason he would, right? Yeah. But yeah, like, at the end of the day, they're all human beings. Mm-hmm. And
I mean, just with so many things, actually. And even with the D&D, like, the different players, like, people are humans, they are different, and there's some things that work for
It's kind of weird, like, imagine Nazis, like, well, I mean, Hitler did go on a tour of Paris, right?
Yeah.
But you imagine, like, Nazis in Disneyland or something.
Well, I mean, there's a piece of footage I saw, which is the Olympic Games, and that were held in Germany, and there's, like, the Nazis are staying there in their freaky stormtrooper attire, basically, or, well, I guess the Roman regalia. And I mean, the main thing that I was pointing out is Hitler is tripping out of his mind on some drug. He's, like, there twitching during the games, but it's just...
He's going to the soccer game.
Yeah, he watched the Olympics.
Yeah, and the British team actually gave him the Nazi salute.
Yeah.
You see that Palestine, like, a couple months ago, they played a game with Germany?
Yep.
They gave the German team the Nazi salute.
And they also sang the whole anthem.
Ooh, from the start?
Yes.
Ooh.
No, that was one of the big things. They sang it from the start. A bunch of Germans like, we start on this, what, the third or the second?
They start on the second verse.
Yeah, we start on the second.
But it is, I mean, it was a Roman salute at one point. The Americans used to do it, so it's kind of funny how Nazis corrupted so many symbols.
Yeah.
Because they were kind of occultists.
Yeah.
Like, what's it called? There's a sort of religion political belief which is called, I think it's called Nazi occultism, actually. Because the Nazis weren't, like, right-wing or left-wing, or they were, like,
crazy
mystics.
cultists. Yeah.
They weren't fascists.
Yeah.
They were mystics. Like, okay, you can say that they were left-wing or right-wing to a degree, but they weren't fascist. Mussolini's country was a fascist. Nazis were occultists, and
I remember...
But they ruined a bunch of occult symbols in the process.
A documentary, I don't know where or why, but it was actually about Hitler's beliefs in eugenics. However, it wasn't eugenics that we would think about, like, oh, this is the best gene, this is the way to do it. It was eugenics like, alright, these people have relations in this way at this time of the month during these hours while under the influence of these drugs, then their children will be blonde and be better. Like, that was their eugenics. It was like mysticism eugenics, like crazy magic sorcery.
And that's what happens when these secret society stuff gets into people that only half understand it.
Yeah.
Now, I think the opposite argument is, if you had made it perfectly clear from the beginning, maybe people wouldn't have the misunderstanding.
But then they won't get anything out of it if it's perfectly clear.
Well, I think it's more, it's a weird concept, but abstract thought is a very new invention.
Yeah.
And so to represent abstract ideas was very difficult for most of history.
Yeah.
We can do it pretty easily these days, but for a long time people struggled to come up with the idea of emotions even. They had to invent gods. They had to say, Pan chased me from there. Like, yeah. I wasn't afraid because I don't know how to describe that feeling. But there was a god who I called Pan, and someone else says, is Pan when, like, there's a beast of the wild sort of, and you're like, yeah, that's Pan. But Pan isn't, like, if my child's hurt, that's not Pan. That's Ares. And so you had to develop the language to even conceptualize abstraction.
Yeah.
And we live in a time now where it's become more and more complex, and to the point where we can converse about these things with relative ease. We even have weird concepts like reification, where you take an abstract idea and make it an object that you then worship in absence of its original meaning, which is like an abstraction on an abstraction.
Yeah.
And we have all sorts of things that we don't even think about, like the crown. Like, what are those called? I forget what they're called. We had to learn about them all the time.
Orb, scepter.
No, it was in... There's a big thing in English class where there's objects that... Like, if you say the crown, you're talking about the king or the queen. But a crown is a hat. Yeah. But you say, the crown has ordered this. It's like, wait,
we didn't have lessons on that, but I understand what you're talking about.
A hat is telling you what to do? No. There is a person who has authority. Like, the abstractions become extreme. We should wrap up. It's quite late.
Yes.
And my voice... Wait.
Oh, wow. It is very late.
Yeah, all right. No.